the arena, and the challenge. The sky above was dark purple, filled with two moons and the sound of distant drums. The air smelled like ash and fire. In the center of the massive alien arena stood a human, Captain Jace Ward, barefoot, bruised, and unarmed. Around him, over 10,000 Zoltrax aliens screamed and cheered from the stone stands, waiting for blood. Jace didn't flinch. He had been captured 3 days ago while on a scouting mission near the border of the Zoltrax Empire. They took his armor, his ship, and his freedom. Now he stood inside their sacred arena, a place where the weak died and the strong ruled. High above on a balcony of obsidian, Queen Vylari watched with a calm, cruel smile. She wore golden armor shaped like flames, and her black eyes glowed with power. Beside her stood her champion, Lord Grithak, 8 feet tall, covered in glowing red plates of bone and muscle. Grithak had never lost a battle. "If the human wins," the queen said softly to her maid, "he owns me." The maid laughed. "He will die in seconds." But Jace heard them, and he smiled. The arena's bell rang. The fight began. Grithak roared and charged, like a beast. The sand trembled under his heavy feet. Jace waited, still calm. He wasn't just a soldier. He was trained in Earth's most ancient martial arts. He focused, slowed his breathing, and let Grithak come. At the last second, Jace ducked low and rolled to the side. Grithak's massive arm swung past his head. Jace used the momentum to jump onto the alien's back and strike a soft spot near his neck, fast, sharp, and deadly. Grithak screamed. Jace twisted the bone spike sticking out of his back and pulled hard. There was a snap. The champion dropped to his knees, choking on his own roar. The crowd gasped. In less than 10 seconds, the impossible had happened. Grithak was dead. Silence filled the arena. Jace stood over the body, breathing lightly. He looked up at Queen Vylari. She stood slowly. Her face was unreadable. Then she raised her hand and her voice echoed across the arena. "By law, the victor claims what was promised. I and my court are now bound to the human." The crowd did not cheer. They watched in stunned silence as Jace was taken to the royal balcony. 4 alien guards flanked him, but no one dared touch him. Queen Vylari looked down at him from her throne. "You don't even know what you've done," she said coldly. Jace met her eyes. "Maybe not, but I won. Fair and clear." She tilted her head. "You now own the Queen of Zoltrax and her royal court. That includes my council, my guards, and my body." Jace didn't react. "But you won't enjoy it," she whispered. "You are a candle in a storm. And this storm is just beginning." Jace smiled faintly. "Then I'll be the last light that never goes out." Behind the throne, a shadow moved. One of the royal maids, a quiet alien girl with silver skin and deep green eyes, watched Jace with curiosity instead of fear. She had seen many warriors die, but this human, he was different. The queen rose from her throne. "Take him to the palace. Feed him, guard him. He is not a prisoner now, but he is not free either." As the guards led Jace away, the queen turned to her court. "We follow the old law," she said, but in her heart she wondered, had the law just handed over her empire? Or had it given her a chance to understand a creature unlike any other? And, far above in the stars, others were watching. The news of a human defeating a Zoltrax champion would spread fast. Too fast. War was coming. But Jace didn't care. For now, he had won, and somewhere deep inside him he knew. This was only the beginning. The Court of Chains. The halls of the Zoltrax palace were carved from black stone, glittering with glowing veins of blue energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Torches of plasma, fire lit the shadows, and statues of ancient warriors lined the way like silent ghosts. Captain Jace Ward walked through the corridor, flanked by 4 alien guards. They were silent. Their long blades pointed downward, but their eyes burned with silent rage. Not because they feared him, but because the law had forced them to follow him. The air was heavy. Even without chains, Jace felt the weight of invisible shackles everywhere. They brought him to a chamber carved high above the city. Windows, shaped like daggers, let in the violet light of the twin moons. In the center stood a large table, and, behind it, the alien queen herself, Valari, stood in her formal royal armor, a cape of dark silk flowing behind her. She looked at him as if he were dirt beneath her boots. "Sit," she commanded. Jace didn't move. "I'll stand." A murmur passed through the room. Her advisors, 7 nobles dressed in silver and bone, watched in silence. Among them sat General Threx, the Queen's military advisor, known for poisoning enemies and friends alike. Beside him was the High Priestess of Blood Law, and she stared at Jace like she wanted to cut him open and read his future in his organs. "The laws say you command this court," Valari said, "but command and loyalty are not the same." "I'm not here to play emperor," Jace replied. "I didn't come to rule. I just came to survive." "Then you are already a fool," she said coldly. "Because now survival depends on what you choose to do with power." Jace said nothing. The Queen raised her voice, addressing her court. "Our people have never been ruled by an outsider, never bowed to one not born under Zaltrak's sons. But today, we are bound." The nobles said nothing, but their expressions were full of silent hate. "What happens now?" Jace asked. The Queen looked him in the eye. "Now, we test if you are strong enough to survive it." That night, Jace was given a luxurious room overlooking the city. He sat by the window, watching the strange alien world beneath. Streets, floating platforms, ships shaped like stingrays gliding through sky lanes, and towers that breathed with energy. It was beautiful and deadly. He hadn't eaten. He didn't trust the food. Instead, he examined the room. Every corner, every vent. Nothing seemed strange, but something felt off. At midnight, he felt it, a change in the air, a whisper of movement. He didn't move. The blade came from behind, fast and silent. Jace ducked, turned, and grabbed the wrist of his attacker. She was small, quick, wearing a maid's robes, but her eyes were filled with trained precision. She stabbed again, but Jace twisted her arm and pinned her against the wall. "Why?" he asked. "For the Queen," she hissed. "You stole her pride, her throne, her name." "I didn't ask for any of it," he growled. "But if I wanted power, you'd be dead already." She struggled, then stopped. "You don't feel like a conqueror." He released her. She stepped back, shocked. "You let me go? You're not my enemy." "Not yet." Just then, a second figure entered silently through the door, another alien guard, tall and armored. Jace was ready to fight, but the guard held up his hands. "I came to warn you," the guard said in a deep voice. "They will not stop. They believe your rule is blasphemy. This was only the first." "And you?" Jace asked. "I was once a slave," the guard replied, "freed by your laws. Now I choose to serve, not because I must, but because you are different." The next morning, Queen Valari summoned Jace to the war room. "I heard someone tried to kill you," she said, with the faintest smile. "Did you bleed?" "No," Jace said. "But one of your maids nearly broke her wrist." The Queen's expression hardened. "You should have executed her. Strength is the only thing they understand. Then maybe it's time they learn something new." "You think kindness will win their hearts?" she asked. "No," Jace said calmly. "But mercy might." There was a long silence. Then slowly, she walked around the table and looked at him closely. "You confuse me, human," she whispered. "You act like a king, but you speak like a servant. You hold the power to rule me, but you refuse to use it." "Because I want something more dangerous than control," Jace said. "What's that?" "Respect." That night, the maid who had tried to kill him stood outside his door. She bowed. "I wish to serve. Freely." And from her eyes, for the first time, there was no hate. But far in the shadows of the palace, General Threx sharpened a blade, whispering, "The human will not live to see our sun rise twice." Broken chains and growing bonds, the palace was alive with whispers. Every hallway echoed with soft footsteps and nervous voices. Guards patrolled in silence, priests burned thick blue incense to cleanse the dishonor, and alien nobles avoided eye contact with the human now walking among them as an equal, worse as their master. Captain Jace Ward had upset more than a throne. He had broken something sacred, fear. But fear does not die quietly. It sharpens into hate. Jace stood atop a terrace, overlooking the city of Zoltrax, where glowing rivers of light connected towers that pierced the sky. He could feel it, beneath. The beauty tension brewed like a storm. Each act of kindness he offered was seen as weakness, each word of peace as an insult. Yet something was changing. When Jace walked through the lower halls of the palace, the alien servants didn't lower their heads in fear anymore. They looked at him. Some even nodded. The older guards still despised him, but among the younger ones, curiosity had replaced contempt. And then there was her, the girl who had once tried to kill him. She moved quietly now by his side, no longer as an assassin, but as his protector. Her name was Lyrix, and she had served Queen Valari since childhood. She had once believed humans were monsters, born only to conquer, but Jace had confused her. "Why do you walk freely?" she asked one night as they stood on the balcony together. "You could command chains, take the throne, demand her obedience." "Because that's not what a leader does," he said. "You don't lead by fear, you lead by trust." Lyrix tilted her head. "You sound like no warrior I've ever known." "Maybe because I'm not fighting for power," Jace said. "I'm fighting for something else." "For what?" "For change." Inside the Queen's private council chamber, things were not peaceful. "You allow him to walk among us like a prince," General Threx growled. "The people whisper his name like he is a god." Queen Valari sat upon her throne, her fingers folded beneath her chin. Her voice was cold and sharp. "He defeated our strongest. He earned his place. But he dishonors us with his mercy. He weakens the chains that hold this empire together." "Then perhaps the chains were never strong," she said softly. The council stared at her in disbelief. "You speak as if you admire him," hissed the high priestess. Valari's voice was firm. "I do not admire weakness. I admire those who survive what should have killed them." That evening, a visitor arrived from another world. A warship made of black crystal hovered above the city. Its insignia was known to all, the mark of High Archon Sithar, a powerful warlord who once allied with the Queen's empire in exchange for blood, slaves, and technology. Jace watched from the tower as the ship landed, and the ambassador stepped out tall, pale, armored in living armor that pulsed with green veins. He was not here for diplomacy. He was here to threaten. Inside the throne room, High Archon Sithar's voice boomed. "You have broken the pact," he said, pointing a sharp claw at Queen Valari. "You gave power to an outsider. You let a human rule." Valari stood slowly. "By ancient law, the victor commands." "Then the law's a lie," he roared. "And if you will not remove him, we will." Before Valari could answer, Jace stepped forward. "Then come try," he said calmly. Sithar looked at him with contempt. "A human dares speak in my presence?" "I do more than speak," Jace said. "I change everything you fear." That night, Lyrix returned to Jace's chamber, her face pale with fear. "You are in danger," she said. "A spy within your circle, one of your guards, has made a deal with the High Archon. He plans to assassinate you in the morning, during the Unity ceremony." Jace nodded slowly. "Then we'll make sure he thinks he's already won." The next day, the palace held a rare event, the ceremony of Unity, where the victor and the royal line must stand side by side before the people, as proof of their bond. It had not been performed in generations. The court gathered. The people watched from the streets below. Queen Valari wore a robe of silver fire, her face unreadable. Jace wore no crown, no armor, only the uniform he had been captured in. As the priest raised the ancient blade to bless their unity, one of the guards near Jace moved. Too fast. His hand went to his belt, pulling a hidden blade laced with green Venom Lyric saw it first and screamed, but the blade never reached Jace, because Queen Valeri moved faster. With a flick of her hand, a wave of energy burst from her palm, slamming the assassin backward into the wall. He fell limp. Gasps spread across the court. Jace turned to her, shocked. "You saved me." She didn't answer right away. Then finally she spoke, just loud enough for only him to hear. "Not because the law says I must, but because I chose to." That night in her private garden, Valeri stood alone beneath a glowing tree. Jace approached. "Why did you really do it?" he asked. She looked at him. "Because you remind me of what we lost," she said. "Before we became a people of chains, we were free." A soft wind moved through the garden, and in the silence, something unspoken passed between them. Respect. Maybe something more. But far above them in the sky, the High Archon's fleet was gathering. War was coming, and this time, it would not be fought in the arena. It would be fought in blood, across worlds. The Festival of Submission. The capital city of Zoltrax was draped in red and silver banners. The skies echoed with the low hum of ceremonial drums. The people gathered in millions, on balconies, bridges, and massive screens across the empire. It was the Festival of Submission, an event last held 300 years ago when a queen once bowed to her twin brother after losing in sacred combat. But today, the entire empire was not here to witness a Zoltrax prince crowned. They had come to watch their queen kneel to a human. Captain Jace Ward stood at the center of the circle of flame, a stone platform surrounded by fire pillars. In front of him, Queen Valeri walked slowly, her head held high, dressed in ceremonial armor. Her movements were graceful but heavy, like she was walking toward her own funeral. Her people watched with narrowed eyes. Her council stood behind her, their faces a mixture of fury and shame. Above, the sky turned dark as cloud ships hovered, watching from every angle. "The law demands the submission," the High Priestess announced, her voice echoing through the city. "By victory of sacred combat, the Queen of Zoltrax now bows to the human." The silence was unbearable. Valeri stared into Jace's eyes, and then she dropped to one knee. Her hand touched the stone floor. The Queen of an empire bowed. It was history in the making. But Jace didn't smile. He didn't raise his hands in triumph. He didn't nod in approval. Instead, he did something that made the entire city gasp. He knelt too. Opposite her, he mirrored her posture. The crowd erupted in confusion. Priests gasped. Nobles shouted in protest. The law did not allow this. It was unheard of. Queen Valeri's eyes widened. Her lips parted slightly, in disbelief. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Something you've never seen," Jace said. "Respect without dominance, power without pride." He stood up and held out his hand. "Stand with me, Valeri. Not as a servant, not as a queen, but as a partner." Her fingers trembled, but she took his hand. Together they stood, and the fire around them flickered, as if the very world was unsure what had just happened. Back inside the palace, the reaction was explosive. General Threx stormed into the war, Chambers slamming his gauntlet against the wall. He shamed the ceremony, he broke the old law. He honored her dignity, one young noble dared to say. "He humiliated our tradition," Threx roared. "This human must be removed." The High Priestess nodded. "He poisons our beliefs. He makes slaves think they are equals. He will bring rebellion." Threx leaned close. "Then let's give him what he fears. Let's start a rebellion and blame it on him." Meanwhile, far beneath the palace, in the tunnels where the forgotten lived, former slaves, exiled warriors, the broken, rumors of Jace's act spread like wildfire. "He knelt," whispered a scarred worker. "The human knelt to our queen." No ruler has ever done that. Maybe he isn't like the others. In the shadows, a movement began. Not one of war, but of hope. The people who had lived all their lives under cruelty now whispered about something dangerous. A future. Later that night, Jace walked through the palace garden, alone. The moons were high, Silver leaves rustled in the soft wind. He found Vailari, by the fountain, her reflection rippling in the water. "You made enemies today," she said softly. "I didn't do it to win anyone," he said. "I did it because you deserved it." She turned to him. "You understand nothing of our culture." "No," Jace admitted. "But I understand what it means to be chained." She walked closer. "I once believed strength came only from power, from victory. But now, I wonder if true strength is in surrender." He looked at her. "Or in choosing not to conquer." They stood in silence. But behind them, hidden in the trees, someone listened. A royal guard, loyal to Threx, he would not report what he saw. He would report what he wanted others to believe. The next morning, an explosion rocked the city's eastern gate. A storage tower collapsed in fire. Dozens were injured. Panic spread. Threx appeared, before the court. "This is what happens when you allow humans to rule. The people rebel." "How do you know who caused it?" Jace asked. "Because your name was painted in blood on the walls," Threx hissed. A hologram flickered to life. On the wreckage, symbols written in the human alphabet burned red. "Death to the Queen's traitor. Death to Jace." Jace's face remained still. But inside he knew this was not a rebellion. This was a trap. That night, Lyrics found him in his chamber, her face pale. "They're turning the nobles against you. General Threx plans to invoke blood law, trial by sacrifice. They want the Queen to sentence you." "Will she?" Jace asked. Lyrics shook her head. "I don't know. I think she's being pushed to choose." Deep inside the palace, Vailari stood at her private mirror. Her hand hovered over her crown. She had once believed in power, law, and blood. But now she was caught between a tradition that demanded obedience and a man who had shown her freedom. Outside her chamber, two paths waited. One led to Threx and the council, the other to Jace. And with warships from High Archon Sithar arriving tomorrow, her choice would not only decide one man's fate. It would decide the future of her entire empire, rebellion in the stars. The dawn broke over Zaltrax with fire in the sky. Smoke curled from the eastern districts. Alarm horns echoed across the city. Red flags, symbols of rebellion, fluttered from rooftops. And at the center of it all, one name burned like a curse on every citizen's tongue: Jace. To the nobles, he was a disease, an infection weakening the empire. To the slaves and forgotten, he was something more dangerous: hope. And that, more than anything, terrified the old guard. Queen Vailari stood at the high tower window, her eyes locked on the chaos below. Her fists were clenched, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision she had to make. Behind her, General Threx entered with confidence in his steps and blood on his hands. "We have located the rebels," he said coldly. "They hide in the underlevels, armed with stolen weapons. They chant his name." "And what do you suggest?" Vailari asked without turning. "Invoke blood law," Threx replied. "Give the people a name to blame. Let them see you are still queen. Sentence the human." Vailari turned her head slightly. He knelt beside me. "And now the empire is burning." "Is it?" she asked. "Or is it rising?" Threx stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This is not just about rebellion. This is about loyalty. If you hesitate, your throne will vanish under your feet. And this peace he speaks of, it will drown us all." In the War Council room, Jace stood alone before the ancient table of stone, covered in glowing maps of the city. Enemy forces were spreading, not from the outside, but from within. His supporters were growing, so were his enemies. The door creaked. He turned to see Lyrics enter, her silver eyes wide with urgency. "There's a plan," she whispered. "Threxy has summoned the Blood Tribunal. They want to make you the cause of the uprising. He'll twist the law to demand your death." Jace nodded, calm. "I expected it." "Then fight," she cried. "Don't just stand there. If I fight, I prove their point. They want me to become the monster they say I am. Then what? Will you do? Jace looked at the glowing city, something no one expects. Beneath the palace, in the shattered underlevels, the rebels had gathered. A mix of exiled soldiers, freed slaves, and even young nobles who had grown tired of war. They waited for word, for leadership. Then the shadows moved, and Jace walked into the room. No guards, no weapons, just him. The rebels froze. "You came alone?" a grizzled fighter asked. "I came as one of you," Jace said. "Not above, not below, but beside." A murmur spread. "They want you to believe peace is weakness," Jace continued. "They want to make you afraid of freedom. But I don't want your loyalty, I want your belief in a better future." "Words won't stop the guns," someone growled. "No," Jace said, "but unity might." As night fell, Queen Valari sat alone in the royal chamber of judgment. Torches blazed. Nobles filled the room. The blood tribunal was seated. 9 judges cloaked in bone and flame. At the center, a single platform awaited its victim. "Bring him," the high priestess commanded. But the doors burst open, not with guards, but with people, rebels, servants, soldiers, even children, and leading them was Jace. Unarmed, unafraid, he walked straight into the center of the chamber and faced the queen. "If my death brings peace, I will not resist," Jace said. "But you know the truth. They are afraid of the future, not me." Queen Valari rose slowly. Her eyes met his. Something deep passed between them. Shared pain, shared respect, and something more. "Enough," she said. Gasps spread across the hall. "I will not kill. The only man who fought to save my people instead of ruling them." The high priestess stood. "You defy the tribunal?" Valari turned to her council, her voice rising. "Yes, I defy you. I defy the old ways. I defy the chains." Then she looked at the people. "From this moment, no law will bind us by blood alone. This empire will not be ruled by strength, but by choice." But outside the palace, a new threat had arrived. The sky turned crimson as High Archon Sethar's warfleet descended. Hundreds of black ships covered the stars. A transmission cut through every screen in the city. Sethar's voice thundered. "You failed to kill the human. You failed to silence the queen. Now I will do both, surrender or burn." Jace turned to Valari. "We don't have enough firepower." "No," she said, "but we have people." As panic spread, Jace and Valari launched a desperate plan. They opened the city's ancient defense grid, powered not by weapons but by unity. An ancient system, long dormant, that could only be activated if the city's energy grid received voluntary pulses from every citizen. Jace stood on the broadcast platform. "We can fight," he said, "but not with weapons, with will." People across the empire placed their hands on activation panels. Servants, soldiers, children, and slowly, the city came alive. A golden dome rose around the capital, ancient energy fueled by its people. Sethar's first strike hit it, and failed. Inside, his command ship, the Archon snarled, "Launch all wings, burn them!" But before he could, a ripple tore through space. A fleet appeared from hyperspace, unknown, bearing no flags. Jace smiled as the screen lit up. It was a group of free worlds, nations Jace had helped in the past, captains he had saved, leaders who had remembered the human who didn't conquer, but helped. "We heard you might need a hand," a voice said through the radio. Jace looked to Valari. "Shall we fight together?" She smiled. "Not just as allies, as equals." And as the stars exploded in war, the people of Zoltrax no longer knelt. They stood, the final duel of crowns. Above the planet Zoltrax, the stars burned with war. Flames tore through the skies as hundreds of starfighters weaved between the ancient spires of the capital. Beams of plasma and shattered hulls rained down like falling comets. The people of Zoltrax watched from shelter, from balconies, from the ruins of once proud towers. and saw that history was being written not by gods or conquerors, but by a human who refused to rule through fear. Captain Jace Ward stood at the edge of the Royal Command Bridge, watching the chaos unfold. Next to him, Queen Valari issued calm, sharp orders to her loyal guard. "Deploy shield columns in Sector 7, she ordered. "Hold the bridges. Protect the civilians." A young noble ran to her side, panicked. "Your Majesty, the fleet is breaking formation. We can't hold—" Valari grabbed his arm. "You don't need to hold the skies, hold the people." The noble nodded and ran. Jace turned to her. "How long until Sithar breaks through?" Valari didn't blink. "He won't." "You sound sure?" "Because if he wants the Empire, he has to take it the old way, through challenge." Aboard the black command ship orbiting above, High Archon Sithar stood before his war council, his blade hissing with heat. His voice was venom. "The human hides behind our traditions," he growled. "But I will use those same laws to destroy him." One of his generals bowed. "Shall we initiate planetary bombardment?" "No. I will take his life. By law. No one will question it. He is the victor of the arena. I am his challenger." The general hesitated. "And if he accepts?" Sithar's eyes gleamed red. "Then the Empire will watch as their new hero dies before their eyes." Back in the palace, a message came through the central tower. A hologram of Sithar appeared. Towering, armored, his eyes glowing with rage. "Jace, Ward of Earth, you took what is not yours. You poisoned the Queen's mind. You wear the crown of a culture you do not understand. Now, face me in sacred combat. Refuse, and I will burn your people with no law to stop me." Silence fell in the war room. Jace looked at Valari. "If I die, you won't," she said. "But if I do, then you'll die as something this empire has never seen," Valari said quietly. "A ruler who bled for peace." The challenge was accepted. The arena, rebuilt in a single night, stood once more, bathed in red lights. The Empire's citizens filled the stands in silence, their faces grim. This was not sport. This was legacy. On one side stood Jace, unarmored but calm. On the other, High Archon Sithar, cloaked in warforged plating and wielding a blade of dark matter, cursed in 10 languages. Queen Valari stood high above, watching with a heart she no longer recognized. Every second dragged like a blade across her soul. The drums sounded. The final duel began. Sithar charged like a beast, his weapon swinging with blinding speed. Jace ducked, rolled, dodged, his movements precise, almost peaceful. He knew he couldn't match Sithar in brute force, but he didn't need to. Every attack Jace made targeted weakness, a joint here, a tendon there. He wore Sithar down, chipped away at the arrogance. The crowd watched in silence as if holding a single breath, but Sithar was relentless. A strike caught Jace's side. Blood sprayed across the sand. He stumbled. Valari stood, but Jace didn't fall. He rose slowly, blood running down his arm. "You can't win," Sithar growled. "I already did," Jace whispered. "The moment your people saw that mercy can be stronger than fear." Enraged, Sithar lunged for a killing blow. Jace sidestepped. He let Sithar's momentum carry him forward, and then slammed his elbow into Sithar's neck, dislocating it with brutal efficiency. The warlord fell to his knees, gasping. The crowd rose. Jace stood over him. He lifted the warlord's own blade, but he didn't strike, he dropped it. "End it," Sithar spat. Jace shook his head. "No." Then he turned to the people, to the Queen. "Your future doesn't start with another death, it starts with a choice." The arena fell into silence, and then someone began to clap. 1, then 10, then 1,000, and soon the entire arena rose in thunderous applause, not for bloodshed, but for the man who chose not to take a life. Back in the palace, Sithar was arrested by his own former generals, shamed and silent. The Empire had shifted. Valari walked beside Jace through the ruined corridors of the palace, their shoulders brushing. "You defeated him," she said softly. "I didn't come here to conquer," he said. Then why did you stay? She asked. He looked at her. Because of you. That night the stars were calm for the first time in years, and two figures stood side by side on the balcony of the tower. One human, one alien, equal, not by law, but by choice. The new empire of peace. The war was over, but peace had not yet begun. For most civilizations, victory came with parades, with celebration, with thrones reclaimed and banners raised. But for Jace Ward, peace came like a wound, quiet, deep, and slow to heal. The great cities of Zoltrax were still scarred, towers shattered by falling ships, homes blackened by fire. Streets filled with silent stares, some filled with hope, others with doubt. And beneath it all, old hatred still whispered from the shadows, like ghosts unwilling to die. But something had changed. The throne room was no longer a place of judgment, but of rebuilding. Where once swords decided fate, now words held power, and Jace stood in the center of it all, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as a builder. The palace had become a council chamber, representatives from every caste, soldiers, servants, scholars, nobles, now sat around a single round table carved from stardust stone, and beside Jace, as always, sat Queen Vailari, her once imperial armor now softened by a silk sash that bore the symbol of unity. Two hands, one human, one alien, reaching across a broken crown. The rebellion factions in the north demand full release of genetic caste laws, said one noble. The merchant guilds want reparations for the damage during the invasion, added another. And the outer moons still refuse to recognize your authority, said a third. Jace leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Then we speak to them. Not with threats, but with vision. The council quieted. Vailari watched him. He wasn't born to this, but he was meant for it. Outside, the people had begun rebuilding. But not under command. Under cooperation. Freed workers joined hands with retired warriors. Young nobles taught street children how to write. And old statues of emperors were pulled down, not by fire, but by collective hands. And still, a storm brewed. In a dark corner of the outer colonies, the last loyalists of High Archon Seether, those who had escaped the battle, had regrouped. They had no fleet left, no empire. But they had hatred, and hatred needed no army, only a blade in the dark. That night, Jace walked alone through the old royal gardens, now wild with untended vines. The stars shimmered above, quiet. He breathed deep. For the first time in weeks, the air smelled like flowers, not smoke. Queen Vailari appeared beside him. You should be asleep, she said softly. I can't. Not while it still feels fragile. She looked at him. Peace is always fragile, Jace, but the difference is, now people are willing to protect it. He nodded, then turned to her. You ever think about how this started? She laughed. I sent a champion to kill you. And now we sit at peace talks together. Life is strange, he hesitated. Vailari, you know this alliance, this bond we've built, it's not just between two rulers. Her gaze met his. I know. They stood in silence, something unspoken dancing between them like wind through the leaves. But elsewhere, that wind turned, cold. Beneath the palace, in the ancient crypts of former rulers, a cloaked figure walked silently. He moved with purpose, with rage. He was a former high priest of Bloodlaw, one of Sithar's final followers, and in his hand he held a bomb, not one built to destroy buildings, but to shatter faith. His plan was clear. Detonate it during the new union ceremony tomorrow, where Jace would stand not just as an honored victor, but as the first human to be named co-sovereign of Zoltrax. Not everyone wanted unity. The next day arrived. The great plaza of the stars was filled with millions. Lights danced above. Choirs from every world sang together. And at the center stage stood Vailari and Jace, hand in hand. Today, she spoke, her voice amplified across the empire. We no longer kneel to power. We rise to hope. Cheers. We no longer follow by fear. We walk beside those who believe in change. The people roared, and Jace stepped forward. I didn't come here to wear a crown. I came here to return something no one believed they deserved. Freedom. And today, that belongs to you. From the edge of the crowd, the cloaked figure moved, closer, closer. His fingers tightened around the trigger, but before he could press it, a shadow stepped between him and his target. Lyrics. The former assassin turned loyalist drove a blade into his side before he could detonate the device. They fell together. The crowd screamed. Jace turned, saw her fall, and rushed to her side. Blood on her lips. She looked up at him. I owed you. More than a life, she whispered. I owed you. My belief, she smiled, and then she was gone. That night, the stars were quiet again. Jace stood at the edge of the balcony, watching the city glow with candles lit for the fallen. Beside him, Violari placed a hand on his. You showed them something they'd never seen, she said. I didn't do it alone. No, she agreed. But you started it. He looked up at the sky. Maybe, just maybe, we finally won. You didn't just win, Jace, she whispered. You became legend. And, across the stars from one galaxy to another, the story of the human who refused to conquer spread like fire in the dark. They called him many names. The challenger, the equal king, the man who knelt beside a queen. But in the hearts of those who had suffered, only one truth remained. Peace was no longer a dream. It had a face, and that face was human.